Welcome to a journey that will challenge everything you've been taught about this extraordinary spiritual figure. Today, we're delving into the astonishing revelations of Edgar Cayce, America's most documented psychic, who uncovered the hidden reincarnated identity of Mary Magdalene that religious authorities have systematically concealed for nearly 2,000 years. What if everything you thought you knew about one of Christianity's most controversial figures was based on centuries of deliberate deception? Have you ever wondered why Mary Magdalene, a woman who stood by Jesus during his crucifixion when others fled, was reduced to merely a repentant prostitute in popular religious teaching? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Has it ever occurred to you that the distortion of Mary Magdalene's true identity might be one of the greatest spiritual cover-ups in human history? The sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce accessed profound information while in trance states that completely transforms our understanding of who Mary Magdalene truly was. Not a fallen woman seeking redemption, but a highly evolved spiritual being with a divine mission alongside Jesus Christ. The oldest texts paint a completely different picture than what we've been told. Mary Magdalene wasn't peripheral to Jesus' ministry, she was central to it. According to Cayce's readings, she possessed advanced spiritual development even before meeting Jesus, suggesting a soul connection spanning multiple incarnations. This is why religious authorities of the emerging church felt so threatened by her presence and teachings. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover about Mary Magdalene's true identity will shake the very foundations of traditional Christian narrative. Why would powerful religious institutions spend centuries systematically erasing the importance of this woman? What dangerous truth were they hiding about her relationship with Jesus? Cayce revealed that this calculated character assassination wasn't found in original Gospels, but was deliberately created by later religious leaders. The transformation of Mary Magdalene from spiritual leader to repentant sinner was a strategic move to delegitimize her spiritual authority and erase her fundamental role in early Christianity. What if I told you that Mary Magdalene wasn't just another follower, but someone who already possessed high spiritual development and innate wisdom that made her a natural recipient of Jesus's most profound mystical teachings? The implications of this revelation extend far beyond historical curiosity. They challenge everything about how we understand spiritual authority, divine connection, and the systematic suppression of feminine wisdom throughout religious history. As we journey deeper into Cayce's revelations, you'll discover evidence suggesting Mary Magdalene came from a lineage of spiritual initiates possessing esoteric knowledge that prepared her to immediately recognize the divinity in Jesus. Their connection wasn't random. It was the reunion of two souls who had worked together through multiple incarnations. If you're fascinated by these hidden spiritual truths about Mary Magdalene, subscribe to join our community of seekers uncovering the mysteries that conventional history has concealed from us. Their connection transcended ordinary understanding, a hidden truth that challenges the very foundation of traditional Christianity. What Edgar Cayce uncovered through his remarkable psychic readings was that the portrayal of Mary Magdalene as a fallen woman represents one of Christianity's greatest historical misconceptions. This wasn't simply an error or misinterpretation. It was a deliberate campaign of distortion designed to obscure something far more profound, her spiritual dimension and her ancient soul connection to Jesus Christ. When we journey back to the oldest surviving texts, we discover a transformation in understanding that few are prepared for. These ancient documents present Mary Magdalene not as a repentant sinner, but as a respected spiritual leader and one of Jesus Christ's most trusted companions. The revelations suggest something that organized religion has fought to conceal, a soul connection between them spanning multiple incarnations, a spiritual partnership forged across the ages. This systematic erasure of Mary Magdalene's true identity wasn't merely about diminishing one woman's role. It represents history's first major silencing of the divine feminine spiritual force. The emerging religious power structures of early Christianity recognized something dangerous in her presence. Her powerful spiritual connection threatened the very hierarchies they were establishing. Behind the scenes of this historical manipulation was a profound fear of what Mary Magdalene represented: direct access to divine wisdom without need for institutional intermediaries. The impact of this revelation extends far beyond religious history. It speaks to the very mindset that has shaped Western spirituality for 2 millennia. Consider for a moment how different our collective spiritual journey might have been had the divine feminine remained an honored part of Christian teaching. The decisions made by early church fathers to systematically diminish Mary Magdalene's role created ripple effects that continue to influence our relationship with spirituality today. Cayce's readings indicate that Mary Magdalene wasn't simply important because of her proximity to Jesus, but because she embodied a different pathway to spiritual enlightenment, one that honored intuition, direct revelation, and the wisdom of the heart alongside intellectual understanding. The authority figures of the time understood that acknowledging her true role would mean validating a form of spirituality they couldn't control. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring exactly who Mary Magdalene was before she met Jesus. According to Cayce's revelations, she came from a lineage of high spiritual initiates possessing esoteric knowledge that prepared her to immediately recognize the divine nature in Jesus. This wasn't a random encounter, but a destined reunion of 2 souls who had worked together through multiple lifetimes on spiritual missions. The real Mary Magdalene was a mystic, a seer, and a guardian of ancient spiritual traditions dating back to Egyptian and Essene mysteries. She possessed psychic abilities and a profound understanding of spiritual realms that few could comprehend. Her spiritual journey wasn't beginning when she met Jesus. It was continuing a path she had walked across many lifetimes. If any part of this information resonates with you on a deeper level, write "awakened truth" in the comments below. What's truly remarkable about Mary Magdalene's story, as revealed through Cayce's insights, is that she wasn't an ordinary convert who found salvation through Jesus. The hidden truth is far more profound. She was already a highly evolved spiritual being when their paths crossed. This revelation transforms our entire understanding of their relationship and the dynamic between them. Imagine the depth of recognition that must have occurred when these 2 souls encountered each other. According to Cayce, Mary Magdalene possessed an advanced spiritual development that had been cultivated through multiple past incarnations. This wasn't the beginning of her spiritual journey, it was the continuation of a soul path that had been unfolding across millennia. The mindset shift required to grasp this concept challenges conventional religious teaching, but opens doorways to understanding the true nature of soul connections that transcend single lifetimes. The veil between worlds was already thin for Mary Magdalene before she ever met Jesus. Cayce's readings indicate that she came from a sacred lineage of spiritually advanced souls and initiates. This esoteric heritage provided her with knowledge and wisdom that allowed her to immediately recognize the divine nature within Jesus, an instantaneous soul recognition that comes only from carrying ancient wisdom from previous existences. This perspective illuminates why their connection was so immediate and profound. It wasn't the meeting of teacher and student in the conventional sense, but the reunion of two advanced souls who had walked parallel paths of spiritual evolution. Behind the scenes of what appears in biblical accounts lies this deeper narrative of soul recognition and shared purpose that spans the boundaries of time itself. The real Mary Magdalene that emerges from Cayce's revelations was far more than a follower. She was a mystic and seer in her own right, a guardian of ancient spiritual traditions dating back to the Egyptian and Essene mysteries. The impact of this understanding reverberates through spiritual history, suggesting that what appeared as a new religious movement was actually the continuation of much older wisdom traditions, with both Jesus and Mary Magdalene as their culminating expressions. Her developed psychic abilities weren't newly acquired gifts, but capacities she had refined through previous incarnations. She could perceive dimensions of reality hidden to ordinary awareness, which explains why she was often present at the most pivotal moments in Jesus' ministry. Her spiritual sight allowed her to witness and understand the deeper significance of events that others could only partially comprehend. This perspective reveals why religious authorities felt so threatened by her presence. Mary Magdalene represented a direct channel to spiritual wisdom that didn't require institutional intermediaries. Her very existence challenged the emerging patriarchal structure that sought to control access to divine knowledge. The decision to diminish her role wasn't just about silencing one woman. It was about suppressing an entire pathway of direct spiritual connection that threatened centralized religious power. If you've ever felt an inexplicable connection to ancient wisdom that seems to transcend your current lifetime, type soul memory in the comments below. The power dynamics that Mary Magdalene challenged run deeper than many realize. According to Cayce's revelations, she represented everything the emerging religious establishment feared most: a spiritually empowered woman with direct access to the divine, who, by her very existence, questioned the necessity of religious hierarchies altogether. Her presence demonstrated a profound truth that threatened institutional control. Connection with God is every soul's natural birthright, requiring no intermediaries or institutional gatekeepers. Consider the paradigm shift this understanding represents. In a world where spiritual authority was increasingly becoming centralized and male-dominated, Mary Magdalene embodied a completely different approach to spiritual enlightenment. Her journey symbolized direct communion with the divine through inner knowing rather than external authority. The awakening she represented couldn't be controlled or contained within the framework that religious leaders were attempting to establish. Cayce emphasized a crucial insight often overlooked by historians. The systematic erasure of Mary Magdalene wasn't merely a footnote in religious history, but represented the first coordinated attack on feminine spiritual power within Christianity. This calculated suppression established a blueprint for silencing that would continue for millennia, fundamentally altering the trajectory of Western spirituality. The impact of this single decision reverberated through centuries, creating a spiritual imbalance that we're still working to rectify today. The mindset behind this suppression reveals much about the fears driving institutional religion. By diminishing Mary Magdalene's role from spiritual leader to repentant sinner, the emerging church created a narrative where women could only approach the divine through submission and repentance, never through innate spiritual authority. This transformation of her story wasn't accidental. It was strategic, designed to establish a pattern of feminine spiritual disempowerment that would become deeply embedded in religious consciousness. What makes Cayce's revelations so powerful is their invitation to completely reimagine our understanding of spirituality. The hidden truth he uncovered about Mary Magdalene represents an urgent call to reconsider fundamental assumptions about religious power, feminine wisdom, and spiritual authority. This isn't simply about historical correction, it's about recognizing the profound soul journey that Mary Magdalene represents across multiple lifetimes and what that means for our own spiritual development. Her story invites us to question whether our current spiritual frameworks are truly serving our highest evolution or whether they're remnants of power structures designed to limit direct divine connection. Behind the scenes of this historical manipulation lies a deeper question about spiritual authenticity. What might our connection to the divine look like if we honored both masculine and feminine approaches to spiritual wisdom? The journey to reclaim Mary Magdalene's true identity is ultimately about reclaiming lost dimensions of our own spiritual heritage. It's about recognizing that the feminine aspect of spirituality isn't secondary or supplementary, but essential to a complete understanding of our divine nature. This perspective transforms not only how we see Mary Magdalene, but how we understand our own capacity for direct spiritual connection. If you've ever sensed there's been something essential missing from traditional religious teachings, type spiritual reclamation in the comments below. Now let's explore an even more profound aspect of Mary Magdalene's relationship with Jesus that Cayce revealed through his readings. Far from being a peripheral figure in Jesus' ministry, Cayce showed that Mary Magdalene was central to his spiritual mission, a divine collaborator and soul companion working alongside him to accomplish their shared cosmic purpose. The breakthrough understanding here is that her constant presence at the most crucial moments of Jesus' earthly journey wasn't coincidental, but intentional and essential. Think about this revelation for a moment. Mary Magdalene remained steadfast at the crucifixion when many disciples fled in fear. She witnessed his suffering, his death, and ultimately his resurrection with unwavering dedication. This extraordinary presence reveals a spiritual courage that transcends ordinary devotion. What would drive someone to such profound commitment unless they shared in the very essence of the mission itself? Cayce's insights illuminate the deeper dynamics at play. The closeness between Jesus and Mary Magdalene wasn't merely circumstantial. It resulted from a profound karmic connection established through multiple incarnations. Their souls had walked together before, undertaking spiritual missions across different lifetimes and dimensions. The catalyst for their extraordinary bond was this recognition of each other as spiritual partners sharing a cosmic mission to transform human consciousness. This perspective completely reshapes our understanding of their relationship. Rather than the conventional narrative of teacher and follower, Cayce's revelations suggest they were conscious collaborators, each bringing unique yet complementary spiritual gifts to their shared work. The trajectory of their soul partnership extended far beyond a single lifetime, representing a blueprint of divine collaboration that transcended ordinary human relationships. Perhaps the most telling evidence of this extraordinary connection is found in one of Christianity's pivotal moments. Mary Magdalene as the first witness to the resurrection. This wasn't random chance or fortunate timing. According to Cayce, she was the first to perceive the resurrected Christ because her heightened spiritual sensitivity, developed over many lifetimes, allowed her to perceive realities that remained invisible to others. The veil between dimensions was thinner for her, enabling her to recognize and interact with Christ's transformed presence while others remained blind to it. This exceptional perceptual ability explains why Jesus appeared first to Mary Magdalene rather than to his male disciples. It wasn't favoritism, but spiritual pragmatism. She was simply the most capable of perceiving his resurrected form due to her advanced spiritual development. The illumination This brings to the resurrection story, transforms it from a miraculous event witnessed by chance into a deliberate spiritual transmission to the one soul most prepared to receive and understand it. Subscribe now to continue exploring the profound spiritual revelations that Edgar Cayce accessed about Mary Magdalene, Jesus, and the ancient wisdom traditions that shaped our spiritual heritage. Consider how this revelation reshapes the entire resurrection narrative. Mary Magdalene wasn't simply the first to see Jesus after his death. She was the essential bridge between dimensions that made the continuation of his teachings possible. Her role as witness wasn't passive but active, requiring spiritual capacities that had been cultivated through countless lifetimes of development. If you've ever felt an inexplicable soul connection with someone that seemed to transcend your current lifetime, type eternal bond in the comments below. Mary Magdalene's spiritual capacity went far beyond what most can comprehend. According to Cayce's revelations, she possessed a unique ability to attune to the frequencies of Christ consciousness that allowed her to understand aspects of Jesus' teachings that remained veiled to others. This remarkable receptivity wasn't developed overnight, but was the culmination of spiritual evolution spanning many lifetimes. Imagine being able to perceive the subtle vibrations of higher dimensions that most people simply can't access. This was Mary Magdalene's natural state of being. This extraordinary attunement explains why Jesus shared certain mystical teachings exclusively with her. It wasn't favoritism, but spiritual practicality. She was simply capable of comprehending revelations that would have been incomprehensible to others. The transformation this perspective brings to our understanding of early Christianity is profound. It suggests that alongside the more accessible teachings given to the masses, there existed a deeper stream of mystical wisdom entrusted to those whose consciousness had evolved to receive it. Behind the scenes of the gospel narratives lies this hidden dimension of Jesus and Mary Magdalene's connection. Cayce revealed they recognized each other as spiritual soulmates who had incarnated together many times before. Theirs wasn't merely a relationship between teacher and student, but a sacred partnership between two highly evolved souls who had chosen to incarnate simultaneously to fulfill specific divine purposes in the transformation of planetary consciousness. This soul recognition explains the immediate depth of their connection. When they encountered each other, there was an instantaneous remembrance, not just of this lifetime, but of countless shared missions across the tapestry of time. The mindset shift required to grasp this concept invites us to view spiritual relationships not as random encounters, but as cosmic appointments, reunions of souls who have worked together before and will likely continue their collaboration across future incarnations. Perhaps most remarkably, Mary Magdalene served as a conscious bridge between Jesus and higher spiritual dimensions, facilitating channelings and revelations that enriched humanity's collective understanding. This wasn't a role she stumbled into, it was a sacred function she had prepared for across multiple incarnations. Her presence created a conduit through which higher dimensional wisdom could flow into earthly consciousness with minimal distortion. Consider what this means for the transmission of spiritual wisdom. Mary Magdalene wasn't simply recording or memorizing Jesus' words. She was actively participating in the revelation process itself, helping to translate cosmic concepts into forms that could be comprehended by human minds. The impact of this understanding completely reconfigures how we view the origins of Christian mystical teachings. It suggests a collaborative process of spiritual transmission rather than a one-way flow from teacher to disciple. This bridging function explains why Mary Magdalene was present at pivotal moments in Jesus' ministry. Her energy field, refined through countless lifetimes of spiritual practice, created the optimal conditions for dimensional gateways to open, allowing higher frequencies of consciousness to manifest in the physical realm. The journey of spiritual revelation wasn't Jesus's alone. It was a divine partnership where each brought essential and complementary gifts to their shared mission. If you've experienced moments when you felt like a conduit for wisdom beyond your normal understanding, type "divine channel" in the comments below. The systematic downplaying of Mary Magdalene's central role wasn't a subtle oversight. It was a deliberate strategy employed by the nascent church. Cayce's revelations show how her true position in Jesus' inner circle was methodically diminished in official gospel versions, specifically because her closeness to Jesus directly challenged the authority structures being constructed by emerging religious leaders. This hidden truth exposes the political calculations behind what many assume was simply historical development. When we examine the historical record through the lens of Cayce's insights, we see a pattern of intentional revision. Documents that emphasized Mary Magdalene's spiritual authority were systematically excluded from the canonical texts. The blueprint for controlling religious narrative was established in these early decisions, a strategy that would be replicated throughout history whenever spiritual truth threatened established power. The revelation here is that what appears as theological consensus was often the result of carefully orchestrated suppression. Yet despite these efforts, the essence of what Jesus and Mary Magdalene represented couldn't be completely erased. Their unique connection demonstrated something revolutionary: divine love manifesting through spiritual unions that transcended ordinary human understanding. The sacred partnership they embodied wasn't merely personal, but cosmic in its significance. According to Cayce, Mary Magdalene was a conscious collaborator in the mission of anchoring Christ consciousness on earth, a spiritual undertaking they had worked on together across multiple incarnations. This perspective illuminates the transformative power of spiritual partnerships. Unlike conventional relationships based primarily on emotional or physical connection, their bond represented the harmonious union of complementary spiritual energies, creating a vehicle for higher consciousness to manifest in the physical realm. The awakening this understanding brings challenges us to reconsider what true spiritual collaboration can achieve when souls recognize their shared cosmic purpose. Perhaps most significantly, Cayce revealed that Mary Magdalene was the recipient of esoteric teachings that Jesus didn't share with his other disciples. This wasn't arbitrary favoritism, but recognition of her unique spiritual capacity. She was established as an initiate into the deepest mysteries of Christic spirituality, a body of knowledge she had been preparing to receive through many previous incarnations. The journey of her soul had specifically equipped her to comprehend and preserve these advanced spiritual concepts. While the crowds received parables and even the ordinary disciples heard only basic explanations, Mary Magdalene was guided into the most hidden and transformative aspects of divine wisdom. Cayce described how Jesus imparted to her revelations about the multidimensional nature of the soul, the processes of spiritual ascension, and the secrets of cosmic creation. This privileged transmission wasn't merely intellectual, but represented the preservation of a sacred lineage of wisdom that humanity wasn't yet collectively ready to receive. The implications of this revelation are profound. It suggests that alongside the more accessible teachings that became mainstream Christianity, there existed a parallel stream of advanced mystical instruction designed for souls who had reached sufficient spiritual development. The catalyst for this deeper understanding wasn't institutional authority, but inner spiritual evolution, a completely different paradigm than the hierarchical model that would later dominate organized religion. If you've ever sensed there are deeper spiritual truths behind the surface-level religious and teachings we commonly receive, type hidden wisdom in the comments below. Let's explore the extraordinary depth of spiritual knowledge that Jesus shared exclusively with Mary Magdalene. According to Cayce's readings, Jesus revealed to her profound insights about the multidimensional nature of the soul, teachings far beyond what appeared in conventional gospel accounts. These weren't simplistic religious concepts, but sophisticated understandings about how consciousness exists simultaneously. Across multiple planes of reality, Mary Magdalene could comprehend these complex revelations precisely because her soul development across many lifetimes had prepared her for this level of cosmic understanding. Imagine conversations between them, exploring how the soul navigates different dimensions between incarnations, the mechanics of spiritual ascension, and the sacred geometry underlying creation itself. The breakthrough insight here is that Mary Magdalene wasn't merely a passive recipient of these teachings. She was an active participant in these explorations, bringing her own wisdom and perspectives to their shared discoveries. This vision of spiritual collaboration completely transforms our understanding of early Christian mysticism. What's particularly remarkable is Mary Magdalene's mastery of practical spiritual alchemy, the applied wisdom that transforms theory into lived experience. Cayce revealed that she understood how to transmute negative emotions into higher vibrational energy, how to consciously access expanded states of awareness, and how to channel divine healing energy. These weren't abstract concepts to her, but practical techniques she had refined over countless lifetimes of spiritual development. The hidden truth is that Mary Magdalene embodied a path of spiritual transformation that integrated mystical understanding with practical application, a balanced approach often missing from institutionalized religion. Her journey illuminates how spiritual wisdom isn't merely about accumulating knowledge, but about embodying that knowledge through conscious practice and inner alchemy. The mindset shift required to grasp this approach challenges the separation between spiritual theory and lived experience that has dominated Western religious thought. Perhaps most provocative is Cayce's revelation that Mary Magdalene possessed personal manuscripts recording the mystical revelations she received directly from Jesus. These weren't merely copies of his teachings, but included detailed meditation techniques, spiritual healing practices, and methods for raising consciousness that were not shared widely. The existence of these documents, systematically sought out and destroyed by later religious authorities, represented a direct threat to institutional control over spiritual experience. According to Cayce, these manuscripts contained specific instructions on developing psychic abilities, establishing communication with higher spiritual planes, and recognizing divine presence across different dimensions of reality. The preservation and transmission of this knowledge would have empowered individuals to establish direct divine connections without institutional intermediaries, precisely what emerging church hierarchies feared most. The catalyst for this suppression wasn't concern about heresy, but fear of losing centralized control over spiritual authority. What Mary Magdalene preserved in these manuscripts was essentially a practical roadmap to spiritual awakening, one that honored direct experience over doctrine and personal transformation over institutional loyalty. The journey these teachings outlined wasn't about blind faith, but conscious evolution, offering specific methods for expanding awareness beyond ordinary perception and into the multidimensional nature of reality itself. If you've ever sensed there's a more direct path to spiritual awakening than what's taught by conventional religions, type direct path in the comments below. Now let's explore one of the most extraordinary aspects of Mary Magdalene's spiritual capacity, According to Cayce's readings, she received practical instructions from Jesus on consciously navigating between different states of being, essentially moving between dimensions while maintaining complete memory and identity continuity. This wasn't theoretical knowledge, but applied wisdom that allowed her to traverse the veils between worlds with full awareness. These remarkable abilities weren't newly acquired, but represented skills she had developed and refined through many incarnations. Consider what this dimensional fluidity would mean in practical terms. Mary Magdalene could access higher realms of consciousness at will, bringing back insights and understandings that would be inaccessible to others. The transformation this brings to our understanding of spiritual development is profound. It suggests that boundaries between physical and spiritual realms aren't fixed, but permeable to those who have developed the necessary inner technologies. The blueprint for this consciousness expansion was precisely what made her teaching so revolutionary and threatening to emerging religious orthodoxy. This multidimensional awareness explains why Cayce revealed that Mary Magdalene was specifically prepared through many lifetimes to become a guardian of sacred knowledge. Her soul journey had uniquely equipped her to ensure Christianity's deepest esoteric truths weren't lost. During periods of persecution and doctrinal distortion, the hidden truth here is that she wasn't merely preserving information, but establishing secret initiatory lineages that would keep authentic spiritual practices alive through centuries of religious suppression. These underground traditions maintained the flame of original Christic wisdom, allowing spiritually developed souls of different eras to access genuine teachings through channels outside official ecclesiastical authority. Behind the scenes of official religious history, these lineages created an unbroken chain of transmission that preserved the most transformative aspects of Jesus' teachings, the very elements that institutional Christianity either couldn't comprehend or actively feared. What makes this revelation particularly relevant for our times is Cayce's insight that the teachings transmitted to Mary Magdalene contain specific keys to resolving modern humanity's spiritual challenges. The awakening these teachings offers practical solutions to issues that conventional religious approaches have failed to adequately address. This isn't ancient wisdom that's merely historically interesting. It's directly applicable to the spiritual evolution humanity is currently experiencing. The journey of consciousness that Mary Magdalene represents offers a roadmap for navigating the very transformations many are experiencing today. Expanded awareness, multidimensional perception, and direct spiritual connection beyond institutional frameworks. The mindset shifts her teachings speak directly to the spiritual seekers of our time who sense that something essential has been missing from conventional religious instruction. This explains why interest in Mary Magdalene has surged in recent decades, despite centuries of suppression. The vibrational frequency of her wisdom resonates with the exact spiritual capacities that are awakening in humanity right now. The catalyst for this resurgence isn't simply historical curiosity, but soul recognition, an intuitive remembering of wisdom that transcends time and speaks directly to our current evolutionary needs. If you've been drawn to Mary Magdalene's story without fully understanding why, perhaps your soul recognizes something in her wisdom that speaks to your own spiritual journey. Type soul recognition if you've experienced this mysterious connection. The spiritual dynamics within Jesus' inner circle were far more complex than most religious accounts portray. Cayce revealed significant tension between Mary Magdalene and some of the apostles, particularly Peter, who openly expressed discomfort with her privileged position. This wasn't merely a personal conflict, but reflected a profound clash between two fundamentally different approaches to spirituality, one that recognized spiritual equality regardless of gender, and another determined to maintain traditional patriarchal structures. Peter frequently questioned why a woman would receive teachings that weren't shared with the men in the group. The breakthrough insight here is that this resistance wasn't really about Mary Magdalene as an individual. It was about what her spiritual authority represented. Her empowered presence directly challenged the cultural expectations of the time, forcing the disciples to confront their own preconceptions about spiritual capacity and divine leadership. What's particularly revealing about this dynamic is that the apostles' jealousy stemmed from their recognition that Mary Magdalene possessed a connection to Jesus that they simply couldn't achieve despite all their efforts and dedication. They observed how Jesus addressed her with a special intimacy and respect, sharing insights that remained veiled to other members of the group. This created an environment of spiritual competition where these male disciples felt diminished by the intuitive and mystical superiority demonstrated by a woman. The hidden truth behind this conflict reveals much about the limitations of spiritual understanding. The apostles struggled to reconcile their conceptual framework of hierarchy and worthiness with the living example of spiritual receptivity that Mary Magdalene embodied. The transformation this understanding brings to our perception of early Christianity illuminates how even sincere spiritual seekers can be blinded by cultural conditioning that limits their recognition of divine presence in unexpected forms. The most significant conflicts arose when Mary Magdalene attempted to share with the other disciples the special revelations she had received from Jesus. She encountered resistance and even open hostility from those who considered themselves more qualified to receive and transmit such teachings. The journey towards spiritual understanding often becomes most challenging when it requires us to transcend our own ego-based expectations about who deserves spiritual authority. Among the apostles, Judas Iscariot demonstrated particular resentment toward Mary Magdalene. Cayce revealed that he viewed her influence as a direct obstacle to his plans to use Jesus' teachings for personal gain. The mindset behind this opposition exposes how spiritual teachings can be manipulated when approached through the lens of self-interest rather than genuine transformation. Mary Magdalene represented a truth-centered approach to spirituality that naturally threatened those with hidden agendas. This systematic resistance forced her to develop discreet strategies for preserving and transmitting the wisdom she received, often resorting to smaller circles of female disciples who were more receptive to her spiritual leadership. Behind the scenes of the gospel narratives, these women's circles created protected spaces where authentic spiritual transmission could continue despite growing institutional opposition. The impact of this alternative lineage of teaching would eventually go underground, but never completely disappear. If you've ever experienced resistance when sharing spiritual insights that challenged established beliefs, type Truth Guardian in the comments below. What makes this spiritual dynamic even more fascinating is how Jesus himself responded to this tension. Cayce's readings revealed that Jesus frequently validated Mary Magdalene's insights publicly, often correcting the apostles' misinterpretations in her favor. In these moments, Jesus wasn't just affirming an individual, he was demonstrating through lived example that spiritual wisdom wasn't exclusive to men or to those with formal religious training. The awakening this created for some disciples was profound, while for others it created what modern psychology might call narcissistic wounds, as they struggled to accept a reality that contradicted their fundamental assumptions about spiritual authority. Imagine the internal conflict these men experienced when their teacher consistently elevated the understanding of someone they'd been culturally conditioned to view as spiritually inferior. This revelation provides a powerful insight into why resistance to feminine spiritual leadership has been so persistent throughout history. It challenges not just intellectual beliefs but deeply ingrained identity structures. The transformation required isn't merely conceptual, but demands a complete reimagining of how divine wisdom manifests in the world. The tension between Mary Magdalene and the apostles reached its peak after the resurrection, when she became the primary witness to this pivotal event. This wasn't merely a historical coincidence, but the culmination of her soul's long journey with Christ across multiple lifetimes. Her direct experience with the resurrected Jesus conferred a spiritual authority that even the most resistant disciples couldn't directly question. The breakthrough understanding here is that Mary Magdalene's position wasn't arbitrary, but earned through her developed spiritual capacity to perceive realities beyond ordinary awareness. This placed Peter and the other apostles in an extraordinary dilemma. They couldn't deny the reality of Mary Magdalene's experience, which Jesus himself had validated, yet they struggled to reconcile this with their vision for the future leadership of the Christian community. The journey toward resolution of this tension would ultimately shape the entire trajectory of Western spirituality, as the decisions made in this pivotal moment would echo through millennia of religious development. Cayce's revelations show that this early conflict laid the foundation for thousands of years of feminine spiritual wisdom suppression within organized Christianity. What began as personal resistance to Mary Magdalene's authority evolved into systematic exclusion of women from spiritual leadership, creating a fundamental imbalance that significantly weakened the Christian message and limited its transformative potential. The hidden truth here is that this wasn't a minor historical footnote, but a pivotal moment that fractured the completeness of Christian teaching. The impact of this spiritual schism continues to resonate today. By failing to integrate feminine leadership and perspective, early Christianity created a religious framework that prioritized hierarchical authority over direct spiritual experience, precisely the opposite of what Jesus and Mary Magdalene had modeled in their partnership. This historical wound created an incomplete expression of spirituality that many contemporary seekers intuitively sense is missing essential elements of wholeness. If you've ever felt that traditional religious structures seem incomplete or imbalanced in their approach to spiritual wisdom, type spiritual wholeness in the comments below. One of the most extraordinary validations of Cayce's insights came centuries after his revelations, with the discovery of the Gospel of Mary in the 20th century. This remarkable text, found among the Nag Hammadi library in Egypt, confirmed what Cayce had already described decades earlier: Mary Magdalene's hidden importance in early Christianity. The transformative power of this discovery cannot be overstated. Here was tangible historical evidence, presenting Mary Magdalene not as a peripheral figure, but as an authoritative spiritual leader who received direct dialogues with Jesus about the soul's deepest mysteries. This ancient manuscript illuminates conversations of profound spiritual depth between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, exchanges that went far beyond the simplified teachings found in canonical Gospels. The hidden truth revealed in these pages aligns perfectly with Cayce's descriptions of their unique relationship. Imagine the revelation for modern scholars when this document emerged from the desert sands, confirming what the sleeping prophet had accessed through his remarkable trance states decades before. Within the Gospel of Mary, we find detailed accounts of Mary Magdalene's mystical visions and dialogues with Jesus about the soul's journey through different levels of consciousness. The text describes sophisticated spiritual processes that transcend conventional Christian interpretations, revealing a system of inner development that more closely resembles advanced meditation practices than simple religious doctrine. The journey outlined in these pages isn't about blind faith, but conscious evolution through progressively refined states of awareness. The document reveals Mary Magdalene engaging with Jesus about the ascent of the soul through different planes of existence, the nature of spiritual reality, and practical methods for transcending the limitations of earthly consciousness. What's particularly striking is how these teachings align with perennial wisdom traditions across cultures while maintaining their uniquely Christian expression. The awakening this perspective brings challenges the simplistic versions of Christianity that have dominated Western culture for centuries. What's most revealing about this gospel isn't just its content, but the history of its deliberate exclusion. Church councils didn't reject the Gospel of Mary because they considered it inauthentic or false. According to Cayce's insights, they systematically excluded it precisely because it contained revelations that directly challenged the controlled narrative religious authorities were carefully constructing. The document presented Mary Magdalene exercising spiritual authority naturally and unquestionably, setting dangerous precedents for female empowerment within the new religion. Most threatening was the Gospel's depiction of the special soul connection between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, a relationship that transcended conventional understanding and suggested spiritual partnership rather than hierarchical teaching. The blueprint of spiritual equality this text presented posed fundamental challenges to the patriarchal power structures being established. The mindset behind this exclusion reveals much about the political calculations that shaped early Christianity's official narrative. The mystical visions described in the Gospel of Mary reveal teachings about the illusory nature of the material world and methods for transcending this illusion through the development of Christ consciousness. Mary Magdalene describes experiences of expanded states of awareness, where she received direct revelations about the multidimensional structure of reality and the processes of soul evolution through multiple existences, concepts that align perfectly with what Cayce had accessed through his remarkable psychic abilities. If you've ever wondered why certain spiritual teachings feel familiar even when encountering them for the first time, as if your soul remembers what your mind has forgotten, type ancient remembering in the comments below. The discovery of the Gospel of Mary represents far more than an archaeological curiosity. It's an extraordinary validation of what Edgar Cayce had revealed decades earlier through his psychic readings. This remarkable convergence between ancient text and psychic insight provides compelling evidence for Mary Magdalene's true spiritual identity as an advanced soul who had incarnated alongside Jesus through multiple lifetimes. The hidden truth emerging from these parallel revelations challenges us to completely reconsider not just who Mary Magdalene was, but the very nature of soul connections that transcend individual lifetimes. Modern scholars studying this gospel have begun recognizing patterns that corroborate Cayce's revelations about Mary Magdalene's special importance in the mystical circles of early Christianity. This confluence of evidence from multiple sources indicates that the truth about her reincarnated identity is emerging naturally as humanity's collective consciousness becomes more receptive to expanded spiritual perspectives. The transformation this understanding brings to conventional religious history isn't merely academic. It's revolutionary in its implications for how we understand spiritual development itself. Yet the evidence suggests this wisdom was nearly lost forever. During the early centuries of Christianity, various communities still preserved memories of Mary Magdalene's spiritual importance. These living traditions honored her as a teacher in her own right, recognizing the unique perspective she brought to Christian spirituality. The journey of these communities, however, took a dark turn as the church became increasingly institutionalized. What began as subtle discouragement of these traditions eventually evolved into outright banning as the patriarchal structure consolidated its power. The decision-making behind this systematic silencing reveals a calculated strategy. Church councils made specific choices to limit and control narratives about Mary Magdalene, deliberately excluding texts that portrayed her in positions of leadership while prioritizing interpretations that minimized her influence. The blueprint for this erasure included the intentional confusion between Mary Magdalene and other women mentioned in the Gospels, a strategy designed to obscure her unique identity and diminish her specific importance in Christian history. What's truly remarkable is that despite these systematic efforts to erase her spiritual legacy, fragments of Mary Magdalene's wisdom managed to survive through alternative channels that escaped ecclesiastical control. Secret oral traditions, preserved by mystical lineages, kept alive the memory of her role as a bearer of special esoteric teachings. Gnostic communities, Christian Sufis, and other esoteric groups developed spiritual practices based on the wisdom attributed to her, creating subterranean currents of Christian authenticity that flowed parallel to official institutions for centuries. These preserved traditions maintained core understandings that Mary Magdalene represented the embodiment of divine feminine wisdom, aspects of Christian spirituality that transcend dogmatic limitations. The awakening this perspective brings challenges us to recognize how essential truths can survive even the most determined efforts at suppression when they resonate with the soul's deepest knowing. Today, we're witnessing the fulfillment of what Cayce predicted, a quiet revolution in spiritual development approaches inspired by the recognition of Mary Magdalene's true identity. This transformation is gradually shifting spiritual paradigms from hierarchical models based on external authority toward more democratic approaches centered on direct experience and personal insight. The mindset behind this evolution honors the very essence of what Mary Magdalene represented, the understanding that authentic spiritual connection requires no intermediaries, because the divine speaks directly to the awakened heart. If you've noticed yourself being drawn toward more direct, experiential spiritual practices rather than those based on external authority, type "inner knowing" in the comments. As we've explored the extraordinary revelations about Mary Magdalene's reincarnated identity and spiritual significance, I hope you felt that resonance of truth that often accompanies hidden wisdom finally coming to light. What Edgar Cayce accessed through his remarkable abilities wasn't just historical correction, but spiritual restoration, recovering essential knowledge that our souls have been missing for millennia. The journey of Mary Magdalene's truth parallels our own spiritual awakening in many ways. Just as her wisdom had to survive underground for centuries before re-emerging when humanity was ready to receive it, many of us carry soul memories and spiritual understanding that have remained dormant until the right moment of recognition. If this exploration has illuminated something within you, if you've felt that inexplicable knowing as we've discussed these revelations, I'd love for you to simply type "Soul Awakened" in the comments. This simple act creates a constellation of light, showing how many of us are recognizing these deeper truths together. I create these videos as pathways to wisdom that has been deliberately concealed, and each one reveals another piece of our collective spiritual heritage. If you found value in this journey, subscribing to the channel ensures you'll be part of this continuing exploration of hidden spiritual truth. When you click that like button, you're helping others find this information too, expanding the circle of awakening that's unfolding across humanity right now. There's another video waiting for you that explores Edgar Cayce's revelations about the hidden Essene community that both Jesus and Mary Magdalene were connected to in previous incarnations. Click there now and continue this journey of spiritual rediscovery with me. There's so much more waiting to be revealed.